Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's episode of Trending, brought to you in association with Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING and you get 10% off. Now, we sort of pride ourselves here on the fact that we try and kind of show you things and speak about things that maybe the mainstream media won't, or at least if we share the same stories, then at least we kind of come in from a different angle. But sometimes there is such an amazing story, almost, earth-shattering, and fear of being melodramatic story, that we actually find ourselves aligning with the mainstream media. So if you want to just watch this video now, this is from Sky News, Rupert Murdoch, Sky News. Who would think that I would align with them? There you go.
Prime Minister helping the Queen recover her water. And I'm quite close to where the King and Queen are. There's a lot of pollen around here from the trees coming down, and it will be affecting all those present.
It's a bloke picking up a bottle. Moving on, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel plan to seize all of Gaza and hold it indefinitely. That will be intensive as opposed to the kind of laid-back massacre we've been witnessing for the last couple of years. Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's plan to capture all of the Gaza Strip will be intensive, with troops to remain there for an unspecified length of time. Forever. The Israeli Prime Minister says IDF forces will not launch raids and then abandon territory, but the opposite. So they won't launch raids and they won't abandon the territory. I don't think he means that. I think he means that they will go in, kill everyone, force everyone else out, and then just steal it. Been doing it for, 80 odd years nearly. The Israeli official said that the newly approved offensive plan would move Gaza's civilian population southward, ethnically cleanse the area, and keep humanitarian aid from falling into Hamas's hand. Well, they've not allowed any aid in for weeks and weeks and weeks now, which is why children are starving to death. The scenes that we're witnessing at the minute, they remind me of the scenes that came out of Ethiopia in the 80s. Some of you are old enough to remember those scenes. Absolutely horrific. On Sunday, the United Nations rejected what it said was a new plan for aid to be distributed in what it described as Israeli hubs. Well, actually, basically what they're doing is they're not going to allow aid agencies, of which I've got some questions about a lot of them as well, but it's not allowing them to be the ones that distribute the aid. So, your Save the Children, your UN, these kind of groups, they're going to be off, and it's going to be controlled by security forces that are employed by the Israelis. So what that means is basically they're going to be able to use aid as a weapon, which is what they've done this whole time anyway, to get what they want. And what they want is the land. They want all of it. Now, a news story breaking like this, I've seen quite a lot of commentators saying, oh my goodness me, this is outrageous. Netanyahu's saying that they're basically going to steal Gaza. And I'm looking at them going, well, obviously, it was the point of the whole thing. It's why October the 7th was allowed to happen. It's why Hamas were supported and funded into being back in the 1980s. They've made no bones about that fact, about the fact that they were supporting Hamas to basically split the Palestinians in half and take away some of the power from the PLO under Yasser Arafat. They were gaining quite a lot of support. And Netanyahu said as recently as 2019 that they needed to continue funding Hamas to stop a Palestinian state ever existing. Do you know what I mean? The one thing I will say about Netanyahu and co is they are honest in that sense. They tell us what they're doing. And obviously with Trump in the White House, they've got a blank check, they've got a blank slate, they can do what the hell they want because they know that guy is well and truly bought and paid for. Now, I was looking through some old tweets of my own in and around October 7th, 2023. And it was an interesting time, actually, because when it happened, I obviously condemned the fact that these Israelis had been killed. I got called a Zionist shill, which is hilarious, given the fact that I've spent most of the last 20 years being called an anti-Semite. That was quite an interesting one. And I looked at some of the other things that I was saying. I was basically saying, this is going to be unprecedented now, what's coming. And a lot of people were coming back at me annoyed, saying, what do you mean? Why are you talking about how many Palestinians are going to die? The Israelis have just been killed. It's like, yeah, no, I know they have, and I've condemned it because anyone being killed is horrific. But what is going to come is going to be off the charts. Now, I started saying things like 20,000, got laughed at. I think on this show, actually, on Iconic, on Gareth Tonight show, I said, will 100,000 be enough? And people got annoyed at me for that, for saying that I was being over the top and dramatic. Well, look at where we are now. Tens and tens of thousands of children killed alone. Now, the reason I knew it was going to be the massacre that it was I'm not new to this. I didn't come into this arena on October 7th and suddenly start my history lesson from then. I remember way back into Cast Lead and Protective Edge and all these massacres that were carried out by the Israelis. And I remember 2,500 Palestinian civilians, 500 Palestinian children killed because Israel suspected Hamas of kidnapping and killing 3 Israeli boys. Now, I'm looking at it going, well, if you suspect 3 Israeli boys have been kidnapped and killed, which is horrific, of course, and you kill 2,500 people as a result of that, what on earth are you going to do as a result of October 7th? And, we've seen that. Now, another part of it is that we're seeing in the last, few weeks and months since Trump's come in is these laws that have been passed, these executive orders that have been signed off about anti-Semitism. Now, I don't know what anti-Semitism started off as, but what anti-Semitism is now is anyone that criticizes Israel. Full stop. Anyone that calls out the genocide is an anti-Semite now. Everything. It's got to the point where because everything's anti-Semitic, nothing is. It's like calling someone a racist or a transphobe or an Islamophobe. It doesn't mean anything anymore because people use it so much that it loses its meaning. Now, they've been passing this legislation. They've done it in the UK previously, where they're changing the definition of what anti-Semitism means. They just tried to pass a bill in the United States. They've pulled it at the minute. I mean, they'll bring it back, but they've pulled it at the minute because of the amount of pushback against it, where they basically made it illegal to boycott Israel as an American citizen. Now, they've had anti-boycott laws in place for what the equivalent of councils and government bodies and stuff. That's there anyway. But they were trying to bring it in for regular Joes. So the American government gets to decide whether Americans are allowed to boycott a foreign nation or not. Well, that's land of the free stuff's pretty good, isn't it? Now, of course, a lot of this stuff is being passed as a reaction to the fact that people are starting to call out Israel because of what they've done. That I don't think that genie goes back in the bottle now. They've done it before. Well, like I say, they've killed 2,500 people and people have been annoyed and angry, and then it's kind of died off and it goes back to being the status quo. That's not going to fly this time. It's not. And they know that. So they're starting to pass this legislation to basically shut people up. However, I can't help but think, and especially with all they're bombing Yemen as we speak, the pushing for war with Iran, is that these anti-Semitism laws, which, like I say, is about shutting up free speech when it comes to Israel, is preemptive because they know that what they're planning, like stealing Gaza, like this horrendous starving of children and people in Gaza now, they know that that's going to get some serious pushback. They know people that maybe have supported Israel previously. Maybe they're Christians and they're like, well, I'm supposed to support Israel, aren't I? I'm not sure I'd read into that, but there we go. Those people are now starting to go, well, no, this is too much now. This is too much now. And so they want to pass that legislation and are passing that legislation to almost shut people up in advance for what's coming because it's going to get an awful lot worse. Now, what I see a lot is, what is the obsession with Palestine and Palestinians? Why does Gaza matter? We've got our own problems here and all that kind of stuff. See that a lot. Now, children being massacred is sort of a problem for me generally. But also when it comes to the Palestinian situation, I think it's very interesting because it's where the mask slips in terms of our politicians, particularly in the West. Because I've said this before many times, Israel is the end of level boss. It is Dr. Robotnik from Sonic the Hedgehog. Politicians will argue about lots of things and this and that and this and that. But when it comes to that, Don't touch it, mate. Don't touch it. They're all aligned. That's why you've got someone like Starmer, who's supposedly this, far left, if he's as if politician, and he's facing off against Farage and Reform, which are the far right, which again, they're not far right, but whatever, that's what we hear. But when it comes to Israel, aligned. Biden and Trump hate each other. Harris and Trump hate each other. But when it comes to Israel, and not just things they say, but things they do, they're always aligned. Same with Obama. And so you will have all these politicians that they'll come out and they'll cry when there's a natural disaster, or they'll cry when people are killed in Ukraine or wherever else. But when it comes to this, nothing. So for me, that shows the mask slipping. The fact that actually these people don't care. They don't care about any of us. They pretend to care about different sort of sections depending on where the agenda wants to go at that point. Suddenly we care loads about trans kids when we're trying to push through, this transhumanist, no gender situation. But they don't care about them. Of course they don't care about them. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about any of us. But I think when it comes to the Palestinians, that's when you see the truth. That's when you see who these people really are. And I think that's important. I think that's important to note, because when someone tells you who they are, you should listen. In terms of that story, taking over Gaza, obviously, they'll take over the West Bank as well. That's the whole point, because it's part of the Greater Israel Project. Not shocked at all. Obviously horrified, because they're murdering and starving people. And you've got the Republican Randy Fine using the hashtag. Bear in mind, this is a member of the US government using the hashtag starve away. I've got kids starving. Hashtag starve away. Honestly, blows my mind. Psychopath. And actually, he could do with starving, because he's a morbidly obese mess. Okay, moving on. Ukrainian attack on Moscow forces Putin to cancel VE Day parade in Crimea. Ukraine fired drones at Moscow days before Vladimir Putin was set to host world leaders at a Victory Day parade through the capital. Russia was forced to cancel Second World War anniversary events in occupied Crimea because of the security concerns. Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has said he cannot guarantee the safety of delegates attending the march through Moscow on Friday, which will be attended by Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. That sounds like a threat. Imagine it was the other way around. Imagine if British Prime Minister or Donald Trump were in Kiev, and Putin came out and said, sorry, we can't guarantee your safety because obviously we're planning drone attacks. Could you imagine that? Honestly. It came as Ukrainian forces launched a second incursion into Russian region of Kursk, breaking across the border and destroying bridges. On Monday, Kyiv fired dozens of drones at Russia, with Moscow's mayor reporting 4 intercepted near the city. The attack temporarily disrupted air travel at, I'm not going to try and say that word, airport, for about 1.5 hours. It's another case of it's okay when we do it. If the Ukrainians were having an event, like I've said, they were hosting diplomats and whatever, and the Russians started firing drones at it, you would not hear the end of it. They would be coming out, they would be condemning. It's mad. But what it is it's because it's gone a bit sort of quiet, but now it's going to ramp it back up again, because that's what the plan is. The plan is obviously for the Ukraine war to become global, and I imagine it will tie in with what they're trying to push in Iran as well. So you're having multiple fronts, which is what you would need for a third world war. And of course, Ukraine as a country and Ukraine as a people are being sacrificed. Again, because like I said with the first story, these people don't care about Ukrainians. They pretend to. They come out, they fly their flags on the government buildings and all that sort of stuff, and they put the little flag in their bio, but they don't care about Ukrainians. Ukrainians are being massacred, and the country is being sold off to BlackRock, and it's being sold off to the Americans, to Donald Trump with his mineral deal, so they can basically rape and plunder the country for its natural resources, because that's what you do when you care. Another thing to do with Ukraine, which is quite interesting, I don't know if you saw this, but it's been the VE Day celebrations, 80 years since victory in Europe, World War II. And so you had, I think it was about 2,000 British servicemen doing this march in London, and they were joined by Ukrainian soldiers. Now, I wasn't surprised to see that, because it's like, of course, yeah, do you know what I mean? Never miss an opportunity to have some propaganda props in there and, you know, try and get sympathy and therefore garner consent for more escalations against Russia. But it was a funny one, because one, I'm thinking, well, I thought you were at war, so what are your soldiers doing marching through London? Should they not be fighting? But the other thing is, well, didn't they fight with the Nazis? Now, a large number of Ukrainians obviously fought in the Red Army, in the Soviet army, to defeat the Nazis. But a large chunk, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, fought with the Nazis. They had their own SS regiment. I shouldn't be laughing. But you're celebrating the victory against the Nazis by bringing in soldiers, like I said, as a propaganda prop, when Ukrainians fought with the Nazis. And it made me laugh, because it took me back to that the Nazi war criminal that was hosted in Canada by Trudeau. And they all got up, didn't they? All gave him a round of applause. And then I think it was Warren Thornton, actually, was the original one that went, hang on a minute, this dude was a Nazi. Do you know what I mean? But they revised their history because it suits them. It suits them now because, you know, they want war in Eastern Europe. And another thing as well, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but it makes my stomach churn when I see these politicians all in their black overcoats, all looking somber, laying their wreaths for all those men and women that have died through the many conflicts, you know, not just World War II, when they are actively behaving in a way that is going to send more young men and women to die. Do you know what I mean? It feels a little bit like, you know, Harold Shipman laying a wreath to commemorate all the patients that were killed by Harold Shipman. It's disgusting. It winds me up every time I see it, especially when you see people like Tony Blair, who is a war criminal, standing there looking somber. Anyway, I'm going to have a sip of coffee. It winds me up because the hypocrisy of it is disgusting. But again, the mask slips. It shows they're just actors. White House has no specific timeline to release Epstein files. Oh, mate. Despite Trump's promises. Oh, did Trump promise something? It wasn't true. Oh, wow. I'm shocked. The Attorney General invited MAGA influencers, oh, that was stomach churning as well, to see the first tranche of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Now the White House says there's no specific timeline to release the rest. Well, where are the first ones? You've just said that you released them to a bunch of MAGA influencers and they're all posing with them, smiling. Files on child abusers. Yeah, make sure you get my teeth in that one. Well, where are they then? Even those ones. You've released those ones. Okay. I don't know why you've released them to influencers. Why you not just release them publicly so everyone can see. That's the whole point of releasing them, surely. But I've not seen anything from those MAGA influencers. So what's in them ones then? So it's all well and good saying, oh, there's not a timeline, no specific timeline to release the rest of them. If you've not released the first lot yet. Attorney General Pam Bondi released the first phase of declassified files on February 27th. No, she didn't. Related to the now dead sex offender, that's if he is dead. She even invited some conservative online personalities to the White House to see the files for themselves. Why not show them to me and everyone else watching this? No? Why not show them to the victims? No? Conservative commentator Rogan O'Handley, known online as DC Drano, was among the group who were given a white binder labelled The Epstein Files, Phase 1. Oh, okay. What's in it then? I can assure you that the attorney, this is what he said, he can, hang on, here we go. Oh, sorry, I had a briefing on Monday. O'Hanley asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt when to expect the bulk of the files to be released or any arrests relating to the matter. Good luck. She said she doesn't have a specific timeline for their release. I can assure you that the Attorney General and her team are working on this diligently. I'm sure they are. Leavitt said before calling Bondi a bulldog. She means that in a nice way. When they started saying that they were going to release these Epstein files, my first thought was, okay, yeah, well, they'll all be redacted then, won't they? Of course they will. It'll basically just be a black page of paper. Because Epstein was part of a CIA Mossad blackmail operation, right? It's how not to mention all the transhumanist stuff that he was funding, but it's part of how a country like Israel, which is the size of New Jersey, has so much influence and power across the world, right? Particularly across the West. Of course, some of it's money. You know, you've got people like AIPAC funding politicians, and politicians are corrupt, so they will take the money and do as they're told. But the other part of it is compromat. It's why Epstein had a camera in every single room, in every single property, so that he could catch these wrong-uns being wrong-uns and then could use that as leverage against politicians. Why would they give that up? They were never going to give it up. They might throw us a few crumbs for a few dead guys, maybe. And they might throw us a few crumbs for some people that maybe have kind of served their purpose. And they can't really do much for us now. Yeah, tell everyone he was in it. We might get that eventually, but you're never going to get the big dogs. Of course you're not. Because they're still blackmailing them. They're still using what they've got on these people to get what they want. It's also more evidence that the whole Trump psyop is exactly that. You know, I'm going to release all these Epstein files. Weren't you a mate of his? There's loads of photos of you with him. Loads of photos of, there's photos of Musk with Maxwell. Now, you can come back at me and say, well, yeah, but they were at the same party together. They were at this and that. You know, just because you're photographed with someone doesn't mean you're up to no good or whatever. It's very true. Absolutely. However, if it was Biden being photographed with Epstein, you wouldn't have shut up about it. Because you wouldn't. And if it was Mark Zuckerberg being photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell, you wouldn't shut up about that either. So it's that whole kind of it's okay when we do it. And you can throw P. Diddy into that as well, because, geez, there's some photos of Trump and P. Diddy. So, you know, were you really expecting these files to come out? I wasn't. I want them out. I want these people convicted. Throw away the key. But I don't think we're going to get that with this administration. Now, final story today. It might seem like a bit of a nothing story. Sugar tax to be extended to milkshakes and dairy substitute drinks. Okay, brilliant. Well, who cares? Well, let me read the story first, actually. The sugar tax applied to fizzy drinks, this is in the UK, is set to be extended to milkshakes and similar treats under government proposals. Plans to end the exemption from the levy for dairy-based drinks, as well as non-dairy substitutes such as oats or rice, were put out for consultation on Monday. Well, it means they're going to do it. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said in her autumn budget last year that the government would consider broadening the tax. That's all it is, isn't it? It's just more tax. Every time Rachel Reeves speaks, it's to say she wants more of your money. The Treasury confirmed plans to press ahead with the changes on Monday, as well as a proposal to reduce the maximum amount of sugar allowed in drinks before they become subject to the levy. Now, what they always do, right, is they have to give you a sales pitch. So there is an obesity crisis. Kids do have too much sugar. Okay, that's true. Right. Well, how are we going to fix it? Well, we're going to tax you, obviously. Do you know what I mean? And so what is a good thing to highlight is just a way in. Get your support for that. Well, yeah, I think kids should have less sugar. All right, yeah, we'll get that in then. But it's more tax. It's more money. So it makes things more expensive. Now, I'm not having it that broadening it to dairy is nothing to do with the net zero agenda 2030, getting people off of dairy and getting people off of meat scam. It's completely part of it because they make it unaffordable. That's what they do. They don't say you can't have something. They make it so you can't afford to have it. And then they can say, well, we didn't ban it. We're not fascists. We didn't say you couldn't have it. No, but you knew that they couldn't afford it. And then what will happen, this is another part of it, is that these companies will reduce their level of sugar to try and make it more affordable for people, right? But what do they substitute that sugar for? Well, chemicals. Stuff like aspartame. Chemical shite that then goes into your kids. So that's another part of it. Do you know what I mean? Having a docile, stupid, sick population, which we say about it every single day, almost, on Trending, which is what they want because it's easily controllable, isn't it? What you don't want is a fit, healthy, energetic, inspired population Because that kind of population will say no. He won't take your bull. He won't have it. Whereas a docile, depressed, sad and miserable, uninspired, unmotivated, well, they're a piece of cake, mate. Right, final story, right? This is a true story. This is from my own personal experience, because I know that I talk about stuff that's neg, and I don't want to be a neg Nelly, right? So I'm going to end on something slightly more positive. So yesterday, right, my two kids and I were playing hide and seek, as you do when you're 43. So they were off hiding, and I'm stood in my youngest bedroom counting, right, listening to exactly where they're hiding because they're not quiet. And I looked out, and I could see there was this commotion outside, loads of birds flying around. I was like, what's going off here? And it was a crow, right, massive thing, and a magpie attacking a baby bird, right? Now, I know I said this was a positive story. It's not started great. I understand that. These other birds are trying to stop it, but they're too small. They're not competing with these two big things. So obviously, I went running outside, like, oh, hey, like that, right, in my dressing gown. So neighbours are probably thinking, well, actually, this is me. So they're probably not even thinking anything, thinking, oh, it's just Gareth again. So anyway, these two birds fly off, and I look down. I think it's dead, if I'm honest, right? It's not moving. And I'm looking at it in the eye. It's not blinking. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. So I went back inside, but then I see the crow again. So I'm stood there, back in my daughter's room, looking out the window. And anytime the crow tries to fly down, like that, boom, 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 banging on the window, it flies off again, right? I did this for about 20 minutes. Magpie, bomb, 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 off you go, right? So then I said to my wife, I said, darling, I'm going to have to, have we got a box or something? Because I'm going to have to get this bird out the road because it's dead, but I also don't want the birds to come in and peck at it and stuff. I also don't want a car to come in and run over it. And also if the neighbours' kids or whatever go out on their bikes, I don't want them to see this dead bird, right? So I'm like, okay, so we're searching for a box. Anyway, I went down to it, and it just, I'm honestly, this is about probably half an hour later by this point. It's not moved for half an hour. It just hopped up onto its feet, flew off back into the tree. Nothing wrong with it. I was literally buzzing. I was like, yes. And then I looked up and I could see the crow. And I was like, yes. See? So there's a positive story, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. You're probably thinking, why has he told me that? But do you know what? Miracles happen, mate. They do. They do. And it feels at times like we need one. But thank you so much for tuning in. As always, this was brought to you in association with Iconic Coffee. If you head over to shop.iconic.com, use the code TRENDING, you get 10% off. Any profits made from that come back into Iconic to keep us on air so I can tell you more stories about birds coming back to life. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.